Hello, I'm Hat, and welcome to All Hat No Cattle, AHNC for short. Normally I would be doing an anecdote on Thursday, but today there is a story that is breaking across Capitol Hill that really needs attention. Portions of it have been covered by other YouTubers in the last day or so, but there are some new developments that just came out yesterday that need to be included. It's a story of corruption on a grand scale involving Russians and a U.S. administration, but not Trump. This story has appeared before in the movie Clinton Cash and a book about the Clintons and their so-called charitable foundation. However, this is the first major news article that has been in print. It first appeared in The Hill, and their investigation broke this story wide open. A couple of sources have picked it up since then, but none of them really of note, except for two that I'll mention at the end of the video. Wait till you see what I've got for you. A bit of housekeeping. I had to make a few odd frames of the text that I'm reading from because of ads that would dox me or videos that were causing an interruption in the process. I hope they're not too distracting. With that said, let's get to it. This is the first article that appeared in The Hill. It's titled, FBI Uncovered Russian Bribery Plot Before Obama Administration Approved Controversial Nuclear Deal with Moscow. Before the Obama administration approved a controversial deal in 2010, giving Moscow control of a large swath of American uranium, the FBI had gathered substantial evidence that Russian nuclear industry officials were engaged in bribery, kickbacks, extortion, and money laundering designed to grow Vladimir Putin's atomic energy business inside the United States, according to government documents and interviews. I have heard through other outlets that large swath may actually be 1/3 of the United States uranium production. To continue. Federal agents used a confidential U.S. witness working inside the Russian nuclear industry to gather extensive financial records, make secret recordings, and intercept emails as early as 2009 that showed Moscow had compromised an American uranium trucking firm with bribes and kickbacks in violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FBI and court documents show. So here we have actual evidence of Russian meddling in the United States business affairs, and as we're going to see, a little bit of high-level collusion in order to get this deal made. Rather than bring immediate charges in 2010, however, the Department of Justice continued investigating the matter for nearly 4 more years, essentially leaving the American public and Congress in the dark about Russian nuclear corruption on U.S. soil during a period when the Obama administration made 2 major decisions benefiting Putin's commercial nuclear ambitions. The first decision occurred in October 2010 when the State Department and government agencies on the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States unanimously approved the partial sale of Canadian mining company Uranium One to the Russian nuclear giant Rosatom, giving Moscow control of more than 20% of America's uranium supply. And again, I've heard up to as much as 1/3. When this sale was used by Trump on the campaign trail last year, Hillary Clinton's spokesman said she was not involved in the committee review and noted the State Department official who handled it said she never intervened on any Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States matter. In 2011, the administration gave approval for Rosatom's 10X subsidiary to sell commercial uranium to U.S. nuclear power plants in a partnership with the United States Enrichment Corporation. Before then, 10X had been limited to selling U.S. nuclear power plants reprocessed uranium recovered from dismantled Soviet nuclear weapons under the 1990s megatons to megawatts peace program. I'm at a loss to figure out why we had to give Russia the ability to sell us our uranium. The Russians were compromising American contractors in the nuclear industry with kickbacks and extortion threats, all of which raised legitimate national security concerns. And none of that evidence got aired before the Obama administration made those decisions. A person who worked on the case told The Hill, speaking on condition of anonymity for fear of retribution by U.S. or Russian officials. The Obama administration's decision to approve Rosatom's purchase of Uranium-1 has been a source of political controversy since 2015. That's when conservative author Peter Schweitzer and the New York Times documented how Bill Clinton collected hundreds of thousands of dollars in Russian speaking fees, and his charitable foundation collected millions in donations from parties interested in the deal, while Hillary Clinton presided on the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. Just wait, it gets better. The Obama administration and the Clintons defended their actions at the time, insisting there was no evidence that any Russians or donors engaged in wrongdoing, and there was no national security reason for any member of the committee to oppose the Uranium-1 deal. But FBI, Energy Department, and court documents reviewed by The Hill show the FBI, in fact, had gathered substantial evidence well before the committee's decision that Vadim Mikirin, the main Russian overseeing Putin's nuclear expansion inside the United States, was engaged in wrongdoing starting in 2009. Then Attorney General Eric Holder, who you may know as the author of the Fast and Furious program, which was designed to allow firearms to be bought in the U.S., transported illegally to Mexico for no apparent good reason. And one of those firearms wound up killing a U.S. law enforcement officer. No one was held accountable for that hideous program. Backing up. Then Attorney General Eric Holder was among the Obama administration officials joining Hillary Clinton on the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States at the time the Uranium-1 deal was approved. Multiple current and former government officials told The Hill they did not know whether the FBI or DOJ ever alerted committee members to the criminal activity they uncovered. We're going to get to that in an update in a little bit. Spokesmen for Holder and Clinton did not return calls seeking comment. The Justice Department also didn't comment. Mikirin was a director of Rosatom's 10X in Moscow since the early 2000s, where he oversaw Rosatom's nuclear collaboration with the United States under the Megatons to Megawatts program and its commercial uranium sales to other countries. In 2010, Mikirin was dispatched to the U.S. on a work visa approved by the Obama administration to open Rosatom's new American arm called Tenem. Between 2009 and January 2012, Mikirin, or Mikirin, I've said both now, let's just go with Mikirin, did knowingly and willfully combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with other persons to obstruct, delay, and affect commerce and the movement of an article and commodity, enriched uranium, in commerce by extortion, a November 2014 indictment stated. His illegal conduct was captured with the help of a confidential witness, an American businessman who began making kickback payments at Mikirin's direction and with the permission of the FBI. The first kickback payment recorded by the FBI through its informant was dated November 27, 2009, the records show. In evidentiary affidavits signed in 2014 and 2015, an Energy Department agent assigned to assist the FBI in the case testified that Mikerin supervised a racketeering scheme that involved extortion, bribery, money laundering, and kickbacks that were both directed by and provided benefit to more senior officials back in Russia. As part of the scheme, Mikerin, with the consent of higher-level officials at Tenex and Rosatom, both Russian state-owned entities, would offer no-bid contracts to U.S. businesses in exchange for kickbacks in the form of money payments made to some offshore bank accounts, Agent David Gadrin testified. Does this sound a little worse than Facebook ads? A little worse? Just saying. Mikerin apparently then shared the proceeds with other co-conspirators associated with Tenex in Russia and elsewhere, the agent added. The investigation was ultimately supervised by then U.S. Attorney Rod Rosenstein, an Obama appointee who now serves as President Trump's Deputy Attorney General, and then Assistant FBI Director Andrew McCabe, now the Deputy FBI Director under Trump, Justice Department documents show. I think the swamp needs to be drained a little more quickly, as these guys look to be very, very dirty. Both men now play a key role in the current investigation into possible, but still unproven, collusion between Russia and Donald Trump's campaign during the 2016 election cycle. And which of those two is getting all the press? It gets better. McCabe is under Congressional and Justice Department Inspector General investigation in connection with money his wife's Virginia State Senate campaign accepted in 2015 from now Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe at a time when McAuliffe was reportedly under investigation by the FBI. The probe is not focused on McAuliffe's conduct, but rather on whether McCabe's attendance violated the Hatch Act or other FBI conflict rules. The connections to the current Russia case are many. The Mikerin probe began in 2009 when Robert Mueller, now the special counsel in charge of the Trump case, was still FBI director. And it ended in late 2015 under the direction of then FBI Director James Comey, whom Trump fired earlier this year. Lots of names popping up. People who, at one time, were guarding the henhouse and letting the fox in, and now they're trying to point fingers at someone with no evidence to back up their claims whatsoever. In its many twists and turns aside, the FBI nuclear industry case proved a gold mine, in part because it uncovered a new Russian money laundering apparatus that routed bribe and kickback payments through financial instruments in Cyprus, Latvia, and Seychelles. A Russian financier in New Jersey was among those arrested for the money laundering, court records show. The case also exposed a serious national security breach. Mikerin had given a contract to an American trucking firm called Transport Logistics International that held the sensitive job of transporting Russia's uranium around the United States in return for more than $2 million in kickbacks from some of its executives, court records show. And if you're familiar at all with the logistics and regulations that cover transporting items like uranium around the country, you know that that is some serious money being made. One of Mikerin's former employees told the FBI that Tenex officials in Russia specifically directed the scheme to allow for padded pricing to include kickbacks, agents testified in one court filing. Bringing down a major Russian nuclear corruption scheme that had both compromised a sensitive uranium transportation asset inside the U.S. and facilitated international money laundering would seem a major feather in any law enforcement agency's cap. But the Justice Department and FBI took little credit in 2014 when Mikoyan, the Russian financier, and the trucking firm's executives were arrested and charged. The only public statement occurred a year later when the Justice Department put out a little-noticed press release in August 2015, just days before Labor Day. The release noted that the various defendants had reached plea deals. By that time, the criminal cases against Mikoyan had been narrowed to a single charge of money laundering for a scheme that officials admitted stretched from 2004 to 2014. And though agents had evidence of criminal wrongdoing they collected since at least 2009, federal prosecutors only cited in the plea agreement a handful of transactions that occurred in 2011 and 2012, well after the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States approval. That timing isn't suspicious at all. I think that's completely above board, and they had every intention of letting everyone in the media know with full force exactly what had happened. A couple days before Labor Day, huge news cycle. I mean, everybody's really cranked up with a lot of reporting then. Nobody's on vacation. Nobody. The final court case also made no mention of any connection to the influence peddling conversations the FBI undercover informant witnessed about the Russian nuclear officials trying to ingratiate themselves with the Clintons, even though agents had gathered documents showing the transmission of millions of dollars from Russia's nuclear industry to an American entity that had provided assistance to Bill Clinton's foundation, sources confirmed to The Hill. The lack of fanfare left many key players in Washington with no inkling that a major Russian nuclear corruption scheme with serious national security implications had been uncovered. On December 15, 2015, the Justice Department put out a release stating that Mikoyan, a former Russian official residing in Maryland, was sentenced today to 48 months in prison and ordered to forfeit more than $2.1 million. Ronald Hosko, who served as the assistant FBI director in charge of criminal cases when the investigation was underway, told The Hill he did not recall ever being briefed about Mikoyan's case by the counterintelligence side of the Bureau, despite the criminal charges that were being lodged. I had no idea this case was being conducted, a surprised Hosko said in an interview. Likewise, major congressional figures were also kept in the dark. Former Representative Mike Rogers, Republican, Michigan, who chaired the House Intelligence Committee during the time the FBI probe was being conducted, told The Hill that he had never been told anything about the Russian nuclear corruption cases, even though many fellow lawmakers had serious concerns about the Obama administration's approval of the Uranium One deal. Not providing information on a corruption scheme before the Russian uranium deal was approved by U.S. regulators and engage appropriate congressional committees has served to undermine U.S. national security interests by the very people charged with protecting them, he said. The Russian efforts to manipulate our American political enterprise is breathtaking. Now, I've left the link to this article in the description, and there are several affidavits and other court documents that you can peruse at your leisure. It is quite a read. Here's the second of the 3 articles from The Hill. Senate Judiciary opens probe into Obama-era Russian nuclear bribery case. The Senate Judiciary Committee has launched a probe into a Russian nuclear bribery case, demanding several federal agencies disclose whether they knew the FBI had uncovered the corruption before the Obama administration in 2010 approved a controversial uranium deal with Moscow. Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican Iowa, the committee chairman, on Wednesday raised the issue in public during questioning of Attorney General Jeff Sessions during an oversight hearing. The senator cited a series of the Hill stories that showed the FBI had evidence that Russian nuclear officials were involved in a racketeering scheme as early as 2009, well before the uranium deal was approved. According to government documents and recent news reports, the Justice Department had an ongoing criminal investigation for bribery, extortion, money laundering into officials for a Russian company making purchase of uranium-1, Grassley said. That purchase was approved during previous administration and resulted in Russians owning 20% of Americans' uranium mining capacity. And again, I've heard up to 1/3, but potatoes. What are you doing to find out how Russian takeover of American uranium was allowed to occur despite criminal conduct by Russian company that the Obama administration approved to make the purchase? He asked Sessions. Sessions responded, I would offer that some people have gone to jail in that transaction already, but the article talks about other issues. Without confirming or denying existence of any particular investigation, I would say I hear your concerns and they will be reviewed. Senate Judiciary aides said the committee had sent requests for information to 10 federal agencies involved in the Russian uranium approvals. The committee is discussing other bipartisan requests to make in the coming days, and Grassley also is expected to seek access to potential witnesses soon, escalating from the information requests he made a few years back, according to people familiar with the investigation. The senator also specifically conveyed in recent letters he no longer accepts the Obama administration's assurances from 2015 that there was no basis to block the uranium-1 deal. I am not convinced by these assurances, Grassley wrote the Homeland Security Department last week. The sale of uranium-1 resulted in a Russian government takeover of a significant portion of U.S. uranium mining capacity. In the light of that fact, very serious questions remain about the basis for the finding that this transaction did not threaten to impair U.S. national security. Again, why are we buying our own uranium from the Russians? I'm sure there was no quid pro quo associated with this deal whatsoever. And one thing I would like to point out, this scandal first broke right after Obama took office, and Hillary, by all appearances, helped facilitate it. Maybe, just maybe, Trump wasn't the candidate that Moscow wanted in the White House in 2016. After all, Trump does not have a long and storied history making money with the Russians like Hillary does. Just saying. Skipping ahead. Grassley dispatched letters last week to all the federal agencies whose executives served on the CFIUS when the decision was made, demanding to know whether they were aware of the FBI case before they voted. He also questioned whether the documented corruption that was uncovered posed a national security threat that should have voided approval of the uranium deal. It has recently come to the committee's attention that employees of Rosatom were involved in a criminal enterprise involving a conspiracy to commit extortion and money laundering during the time of the CFIUS transaction, Grassley wrote in one such letter addressed to Sessions. The fact that Rosatom subsidiaries in the United States were under criminal investigation as a result of a U.S. intelligence operation apparently around the time CFIUS approved the uranium-1 Rosatom transaction raises questions about whether that information factored into CFIUS's decision to approve the transaction, the chairman added. Grassley has been one of the few congressional leaders to have consistently raised questions about the uranium deal, and in 2015, agencies told his committee they had no national security reasons to reject the Moscow approval. What do y'all think about that? Anyone? Those representations, however, made no mention of the FBI probe or the national security issues uncovered by agents, including the fact that Russian officials had compromised an American trucking firm that transported uranium. Grassley's letters demanded answers from the agencies by no later than October 26. Okay, this bottom part here, updated on October 11th, that's a typo because this article was published on October 17th, so I'm guessing they meant to say October 17th. Perhaps October 18th. Here's the final article in the series so far. FBI informant blocked from telling Congress about Russia nuclear corruption case, lawyer says. An American businessman who worked for years undercover as an FBI confidential witness was blocked by the Obama Justice Department from telling Congress about conversations and transactions he witnessed related to the Russian nuclear industry's efforts to win favor with Bill and Hillary Clinton and influence Obama administration decisions, his lawyer tells The Hill. Attorney Victoria Tensing, a former Reagan Justice Department official and former chief counsel of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said Tuesday she is working with members of Congress to see if they can get the Trump Justice Department or the FBI to free her client to talk to lawmakers. All of the information about this corruption has not come out, she said in an interview Tuesday. And so my client, the same part of my client that made him go into the FBI in the first place, says, "This is wrong. What should I do about it?" Tensing said she also possesses memos that recount how the Justice Department last year threatened her client when he attempted to file a lawsuit that could have drawn attention to the Russian corruption during the 2016 presidential race, as well as helped him recover some of the money Russians stole from him through kickbacks during the FBI probe. The undercover client witnessed a lot of bribery going on around the U.S., but was asked by the FBI to sign a non-disclosure agreement, NDA, that prevents him from revealing what he knows to Congress, Tensing explained. Why in God's green earth would a law enforcement agency ask a witness to sign a non-disclosure agreement? That sounds like absolute coercion to me. When he tried to bring some of the allegations to light in the lawsuit last year, the Obama Justice Department threatened him with loss of freedom. They said they would bring a criminal case against him for violating an NDA, she added. Like I said, pure coercion. Emails obtained by The Hill show that a civil attorney working with the former undercover witness described the pressure the Justice Department exerted to keep the client from disclosing to a federal court what he knew last summer. The government was taking a very harsh position that threatened both your reputation and liberty, the civil lawyer wrote in one email. In another, she added, as you will recall, the government made serious threats sufficient to cause you to withdraw your civil complaint. Justice Department and FBI officials did not return calls seeking comment. Federal court records from 2014 and 2015 show that a wide-ranging FBI probe into Russian nuclear industry corruption was facilitated by an unnamed American consultant who worked for the Moscow-based nuclear energy giant Rosatom's 10X subsidiary on a multi-year campaign to grow Moscow's uranium business inside the United States. I still can't wrap my head around that. If Russia is so evil that we have to sanction them, that we have to designate that we're going to put a no-fly zone in Syria if we're elected president, I'm referring to Hillary, of course, why would we give them the ability to sell us back our own uranium? I just don't get it. Those efforts included winning U.S. approval of Rosatom's controversial purchase of Canada-based Uranium One's American uranium assets, securing new approvals to sell new commercial uranium to the federally backed United States Enrichment Corporation and winning billions in new U.S. utility contracts for Russian nuclear fuel. The court records alternatively refer to the FBI informant as Confidential Source 1, the contractor, and Victim 1 without ever naming him. The records make clear he came to the FBI immediately after Russian officials asked him to engage in illegal activity in 2009. Working as a confidential witness, the businessman made kickback payments to the Russians with the approval of his FBI handlers and gathered other evidence, the records show. Sources told The Hill the informant's work was crucial to the government's ability to crack a multi-million-dollar racketeering scheme by Russian nuclear officials on U.S. soil that involved bribery, kickbacks, money laundering, and extortion. In the end, the main Russian executive sent to the U.S. to expand Russian President Vladimir Putin's nuclear business, an executive of an American trucking firm, and a Russian financier from New Jersey, pled guilty to various crimes in a case that started in 2009 and ended in late 2015. Tensing added her client has had contact from multiple congressional committees seeking information about what he witnessed inside the Russian nuclear industry and has been unable to provide that information because of the NDA. He can't disclose anything that he came upon in the course of his work, she said. The information the client possesses includes specific allegations that Russian executives made to him about how they facilitated the Obama administration's 2010 approval of the Uranium One deal and sent millions of dollars in Russian nuclear funds to the U.S. to an entity assisting Bill Clinton's foundation. At the time, Hillary Clinton was serving as Secretary of State on the government panel that approved the deal, the lawyer said. It has been previously reported that Bill Clinton accepted $500,000 in Russian speaking fees in 2010 and collected millions more in donations for his foundation from parties with a stake in the Uranium One deal, transactions that both the Clintons and the Obama administration denied had any influence on the approval. Federal law requires officials, such as then Secretary Clinton, to avoid both conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts when it comes to the business and financial interests of a spouse. Clinton signed a special agreement when she became secretary to disclose her husband's charitable donations to the State Department to avoid any such conflicts. Both Clintons have repeatedly insisted no donations raised by the foundation ever influenced her decisions. A spokesman and a lawyer for the Clintons did not return calls seeking comment. Here's the thing. It's an open secret that Hillary had a quid pro quo setup going on while she was Secretary of State. If you funneled money into the Clinton Foundation or gave Bill a big fat speaking fee, you got something in return. You got a sweetheart deal, like the Russians and Uranium One. You got an audience with Hillary. Maybe she would try to go easy on some sanctions that you were under. Any number of things. And you know how she managed to get away with this for as long as she did? Her private email server. She did not use a .gov email like she's required to do under federal law. She set up her own private server outside of the State Department so she could play these little pay-for-play games and get a lot of money into that completely fake foundation her and Bill push all the time. It's obvious fraud. If she had used a .gov email address like she was required to do under federal law, then the State Department, the Justice Department, or even Joe Citizen with a FOIA request would have been able to get a look at those emails and see what was up. She was too crafty for that, but it kind of cost her the election, didn't it? I guess there's a little justice in the world. One last thing. She in no way disclosed all of the Clinton Foundation donations that were coming in while she was Secretary of State. She absolutely hid quite a few of them in order to avoid the kind of scrutiny that would have come with large donations from places like Saudi Arabia, China, and of course, Russia. Big, evil, oh my God, we have to shut them down, Russia. Funny how, now that she's not in office, suddenly Russia is the big bugbear, the big, scary monster under the bed. I wonder what changed her mind. Tensing said her client can also testify that FBI agents made comments to him suggesting political pressure was exerted during the Justice Department probe of the Russia corruption case, and that there was specific evidence that could have scuttled approval of the Uranium One deal if it became public. There was corruption going on, and it was never brought forward. And in fact, the sale of the uranium went on despite the government knowing about all of this corruption. So he's coming forward. He wants the right thing to be done, but he cannot do it unless he is released from the NDA, she added. And there you have it. As hard as it is to believe, this major scandal, quite possibly the biggest U.S. political scandal in the last 50 years, has been getting zero attention from the mainstream media. I did an internet search just before I started producing this video to see who else was carrying this story. I recognized only two names in that list: Business Insider and New York Post. Unless there's a major announcement from the FBI or the Department of Justice about this story, CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, they're going to bury it. They are not going to allow it to see the light of day. Can you imagine the general population not knowing about this incredible account of the greatest president of the 21st century and the greatest political candidate ever to run for the U.S. presidency? I read one brief article that said this story has garnered exactly 3 minutes and 10 seconds worth of media coverage on major outlets since it first broke in 2014. 3 minutes. It took me 3 minutes to read a portion of the first article. This is unacceptable. This kind of behavior in the mainstream media has to be called out at every opportunity. I am linking in the description channels like The Hard Bastard, Anthony Brian Logan, and Styx Hexenhammer 666. These are people who need to be paid attention to if you're interested in current affairs and how they are spun by the media. Support these people, and that will help support what is known as alternative media, which is the only way you're going to get the truth out of anything going on right now that isn't serving the mainstream media's current war cry of Trump must be dumped at all cost by any means necessary. You have to stand up for yourself. You have to look out for your own best interests. Support alternative media. It's up to you to keep CNN, MSNBC, etc.'s feet to the fire. Thank you all for watching. Until next time, be well, and as always, thank you for your attention.